The air hung heavy with dust as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Redemption Creek. Texas, 1875, was unforgiving to most, but especially to those without protection. Tabitha Gray clutched her 3-year-old daughter Lily to her chest, their matching auburn hair tangled from days of rough travel. The auction block beneath her feet was splintered, much like her hopes of finding safety in this frontier town after fleeing her abusive husband back east. Next up, we've got ourselves a fine domestic worker, comes with a young'un, the auctioneer's voice boomed across the town square. Starting bid at $100 for the pair. Tabitha flinched as rough hands pushed her forward. This wasn't supposed to happen. The stagecoach she'd been on had been ambushed by bandits 2 days ago, and rather than helping the survivors, the local traders had seized the opportunity to capture those without protection. Without papers or money, Tabitha couldn't prove she was a free woman. Now she stood trembling, her daughter whimpering against her shoulder as men called out bids for their bodies and labor. 150, called out a saloon owner, his eyes raking over Tabitha's figure. 200, countered a ranch hand, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. Tabitha's throat tightened with fear. She'd escaped one nightmare only to find herself in another. Lily clutched her mother's dress, sensing the danger even at her young age. 300, came a deep voice from the back of the crowd. The bidders parted as a tall figure stepped forward. His dark Stetson shaded piercing blue eyes in a sun-weathered face. A star-shaped badge glinted on his leather vest. Tabitha had seen him watching earlier, standing apart from the others with arms crossed and expression unreadable. 400, the saloon owner challenged. The stranger's jaw tightened beneath his neatly trimmed beard. $500, he countered, voice calm but leaving no room for debate. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. 500 going once. 600, spat the saloon owner, the crowd murmured. This was far more than the usual price for a domestic worker, even with a child. The lawman's hand moved to rest casually on his holstered Colt. $1,000, he said, loud enough for all to hear. A stunned silence fell over the square. The auctioneer recovered first, banging his gavel excitedly. Sold to Sheriff Vaughn Calloway for $1,000. Relief washed over Tabitha, though it was quickly replaced by new fears. She'd heard stories of kind-seeming men who turned cruel once doors were closed. The sheriff approached and offered his hand to help her down from the platform. She hesitated, then took it, keeping Lily pressed close with her other arm. "This way, madam," he said quietly, leading her through the dispersing crowd. "What do you want with us?" Tabitha whispered, fear evident in her voice despite her attempt to stay strong. Vaughn Calloway glanced down at her, his expression softening. "Nothing that you think, miss. Those men ain't got no right selling you or your little one. You're free people, and I aim to keep it that way." "But you paid. I paid to keep you safe," he interrupted, guiding them toward a modest building with a sign reading Sheriff's Office. "Now come inside before those vultures start circling again." Inside the office, a pot of coffee simmered on a small stove. The room was simple but orderly, a desk with papers neatly stacked, a gun rack on the wall, and a small cot in the corner. 2 cells stood empty at the back. "Have a seat," Vaughn offered, gesturing to a wooden chair. "You and your little girl must be hungry." Tabitha sat, finally allowing Lily to slide down to her lap. "Why did you help us?" Vaughn poured coffee into a tin cup and offered it to her. "Because what they were doing wasn't right. Selling people ain't legal, hasn't been for years, but some folks out here think the law stops at the edge of civilization." He crouched down to Lily's level. "Hello there, little miss. What's your name?" The child hid her face against her mother's chest. "This is Lily," Tabitha answered for her. "And I'm Tabitha Gray. We were traveling to San Francisco when our stagecoach was attacked." Vaughn nodded, standing again. "I figured something like that. Those traders work with the Dixon gang sometimes, picking off survivors." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small cloth pouch. "There's some jerky and biscuits in here. It ain't much, but it'll tide you over." Tabitha accepted the food gratefully. As Lily began nibbling on a biscuit, some color returned to her pale cheeks. "What happens now?" Tabitha asked, her voice steadier. "I have no money to repay you." You don't owe me anything, Vaughn said firmly, but Redemption Creek ain't safe for you right now. Those men who were bidding on you won't take kindly to being outbid, especially by me. I've been trying to clean up this town for months. He moved to the window, peering out at the dusty street. I've got a small homestead about 5 miles outside of town. You and your daughter can stay there until we figure out what to do next. It's not much, but it's safe. Tabitha studied him carefully. His offer seemed genuine, but years of hard lessons had taught her caution. Why would you do that for strangers? Vaughn turned back to her, his expression grave. Because 7 years ago, my sister and her daughter were taken by traitors. By the time I found them, he paused, his eyes darkening with remembered pain. Let's just say I was too late. I swore I'd never let that happen to another mother and child if I could help it. The simple honesty in his voice convinced Tabitha more than any elaborate explanation could have. She nodded slowly. Thank you, Sheriff Calloway. Vaughn, he corrected gently. Out here, titles just paint targets on your back. As the sun began to set, Vaughn hitched up a wagon and loaded it with supplies. He helped Tabitha and Lily into the seat beside him, noticing how the young mother kept scanning their surroundings, alert for danger. We'll be there before dark, he assured her, clicking his tongue to get the horses moving. As they left town behind, Tabitha felt herself breathing easier. Lily had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from days of fear and uncertainty. She looks like you, Vaughn commented softly, careful not to wake the child. Tabitha smiled faintly. She has her father's stubbornness, though. And where is he now? Vaughn asked, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. Tabitha's smile vanished. Back in Boston, hopefully. I left in the night after he... She touched her cheek where a fading bruise was still visible. He wasn't always cruel, but whiskey changed him. Vaughn's grip tightened on the reins. Some men don't deserve the families they have. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic clop of hooves and creaking of wagon wheels the only sounds. The landscape opened up before them, rolling hills dotted with scrub brush and the occasional oak, bathed in the golden light of sunset. It's beautiful out here, Tabitha murmured, almost to herself. It grows on you, Vaughn agreed. Took me a while to see it. When I first came west, all I saw was hardship and danger. What changed? Vaughn considered this. I started seeing what could be instead of just what was. A man can build something out here, something that's truly his own. As they crested a small rise, a modest homestead came into view. A single-story cabin with a covered porch sat nestled against a stand of cottonwoods. A small barn stood nearby with a corral and a chicken coop. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone's here, Tabitha said, tensing. That'll be Martha, Vaughn explained. She comes by twice a week to help with cooking and cleaning. She's close to 70 and ornery as they come, but trustworthy. The wagon pulled up to the cabin just as an elderly woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. About time you showed up, Martha called. Stew's gonna be overcooked. Vaughn helped Tabitha down from the wagon. Martha, this is Tabitha Gray and her daughter Lily. They'll be staying with us for a while. Martha's keen eyes took in Tabitha's worn dress and Lily's sleeping form, understanding passed across her weathered face. Well, don't just stand there, bring them inside. Poor things look half-starved. The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace providing warmth. 2 doors led off to what Tabitha assumed were bedrooms. Everything was neat and surprisingly homey, with handmade quilts and simple wooden furniture. You can have the spare room, Vaughn said, gesturing to one of the doors. I'll sleep out here. I couldn't take your bed, Tabitha began to protest. It ain't my bed, Vaughn interrupted gently. It was meant for guests, just never had any until now. Martha bustled about, ladling stew into bowls. Eat first, argue later. Child needs food in her belly. Lily had awakened at the smell of food, her wide eyes taking in the new surroundings. Tabitha settled at the table with her daughter in her lap, grateful for the hearty meal. As they ate, Vaughn explained his situation. I'm in town most days as sheriff, but I come back here nights. Martha stays over sometimes when I can't make it back. How long have you been sheriff? Tabitha asked. 2 years, he answered. Came west after the war, did some ranch work, then took the badge when the last sheriff was killed. Fool thing to do, Martha muttered. Town full of vipers. Vaughn smiled slightly. Martha doesn't approve of my career choice. Got enough scars already, the older woman said firmly. Don't need more. After dinner, Martha showed Tabitha to the spare room, which contained a double bed and a small dresser. There's a nightgown might fit you in there, Martha said, pointing to the dresser, and I'll find something for the little one. When they were alone, Tabitha sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Lily crawled into her lap, her small hand patting her mother's cheek. Are we safe now, Mama? She asked in her small voice. Tabitha held her daughter close. I think we might be, sweetheart. I think we might be. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep in the big bed, Tabitha slipped back to the main room. Vaughn sat by the fire, cleaning his revolver by the light of an oil lamp. Martha had gone to the small room off the kitchen that served as her quarters when she stayed over. Thank you, Tabitha said softly, standing in the doorway. For everything. Vaughn looked up, setting the gun aside. You don't need to thank me for doing what's right. Few men would consider it their duty to rescue strangers at such cost. Perhaps there should be more such men, he replied simply. Tabitha moved closer to the fire, drawn by its warmth. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow we start figuring out where you want to go, Vaughn said. If San Francisco is still your destination, I can arrange safe passage on the next stagecoach heading west. The thought of continuing her journey alone filled Tabitha with dread. I'm not sure anymore. I was going to San Francisco because my cousin lives there, but I've never met her. I just needed somewhere to go, Vaughn nodded, understanding. You don't have to decide tonight. You and Lily are welcome here as long as you need. Tabitha studied him in the firelight. In Boston, she'd learned to distrust men's kindness, which too often came with unspoken expectations. But something about Vaughn Calloway's straightforward manner put her at ease. Why did you become a sheriff? She asked. Vaughn poked at the fire with an iron poker. After the war, I drifted, saw too many men with badges abusing their power, figured maybe I could wear one differently. And have you worn it differently? His eyes met hers. I try, every day I try. The next morning, Tabitha woke to sunlight streaming through the small window. Lily was already up, standing on tiptoes to peek outside. Mama, there's chickens, she exclaimed excitedly. Tabitha smiled, rising from the bed. It was the first time she'd seen her daughter show real enthusiasm since they'd fled Boston. They dressed in their travel-worn clothes and ventured out to the main room. Martha was at the stove, frying bacon. About time you two showed yourselves, nearly noon. Tabitha was startled. Is it really that late? Just past 7, Vaughn called from the porch where he was pulling on his boots. Martha thinks anyone who sleeps past sunrise is lazy. Ain't natural, the older woman muttered, but there was affection in her tone. Vaughn came inside, already dressed for his day as sheriff. I need to head into town, but I'll be back by sundown. Martha will stay with you. Can I see the chickens? Lily asked suddenly, looking up at Vaughn with hopeful eyes. He smiled, crouching down to her level. Sure thing, little miss. They need feeding anyway. Want to help? Lily nodded eagerly, looking to her mother for permission. Go ahead, Tabitha said, surprised by her daughter's quick warming to the tall lawman. Vaughn took Lily's small hand in his and led her outside. Through the window, Tabitha watched as he showed her how to scatter feed for the clucking hens. Lily's delighted laughter drifted back to the cabin. He's good with children, Martha commented, setting a plate of bacon and eggs on the table. Would have made a fine father. Has he never married? Tabitha asked, then blushed at her own forwardness. Martha shook her head. Came close once, few years back. Girl changed her mind, couldn't handle the dangers of his work. She glanced at Tabitha shrewdly. He's a good man, better than most. I can see that, Tabitha admitted quietly. After breakfast, Vaughn prepared to leave for town. I'll bring back some proper clothes for you both, he promised. Martha, you know what to do if there's trouble. The older woman patted the shotgun hanging above the fireplace. Been handling trouble since before you were born, boy. With a nod to Tabitha and a gentle pat on Lily's head, Vaughn mounted his horse and rode off toward town. The day passed peacefully. Martha showed Tabitha around the homestead, which was nearly self-sufficient with its vegetable garden, chickens, and 2 milk cows. Lily trailed after them, fascinated by everything. "You know how to bake?" Martha asked as they returned to the kitchen. "A little," Tabitha replied. "I worked as a seamstress in Boston, but I cooked for my husband." "Well, time to learn proper." "Man works hard, deserves good bread when he comes home." Tabitha didn't correct Martha's assumption about her relationship with Vaughn. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and let the older woman teach her the art of frontier baking. By late afternoon, the cabin was filled with the aroma of fresh bread. Tabitha had just finished hanging laundry on the line when she noticed a cloud of dust in the distance. "Martha," she called, concern in her voice. The older woman emerged from the cabin, squinting at the horizon. Her expression hardened. "Get Lily inside, now." Tabitha scooped up her daughter from where she'd been playing and hurried into the cabin. Martha followed, taking down the shotgun. "Who is it?" Tabitha asked, fear clutching at her heart. "Can't tell yet. Could be Vaughn, could be trouble." Martha checked the shotgun's load. Either way, best be prepared. They waited anxiously as the riders approached. Tabitha peered through the window, relieved to recognize Vaughn's tall figure in the lead. But he wasn't alone, 3 other riders accompanied him. "It's Vaughn," she told Martha. "But there are others with him." Martha kept the shotgun ready as she opened the door. Vaughn dismounted, his expression grim. "Everything all right?" he called to Martha. "So far," she answered warily. "Who's with you?" "Deputy Jenkins and the Miller brothers. We've got trouble." He turned to his companions. "Check the perimeter, make sure we weren't followed." The men nodded and rode off to circle the property. Vaughn entered the cabin, removing his hat. There was a fresh cut above his right eye and his knuckles were bruised. "What happened?" Tabitha asked, moving toward him instinctively. The saloon owner from yesterday, Harlan Reed, didn't take kindly to losing the auction. He and some of his men jumped me outside the telegraph office. Vaughn winced as Tabitha reached up to examine the cut. "I'm fine." "But they're making noise about you not being legally sold, demanding their money back." "That's ridiculous," Tabitha said, anger replacing her fear. "I'm not property to be sold in the first place." "You and I know that," Vaughn agreed, "but Reed's got half the town believing you're a runaway servant or worse. He's been spreading rumors that I've got personal reasons for keeping you here." Martha snorted. "Ain't far from the truth, is it?" Vaughn shot her a warning look before continuing. "I telegraphed the territorial marshal. He'll be here in 3 days to sort this out officially. But until then, it's not safe for you in town and maybe not even here." "What do we do?" Tabitha asked, holding Lily closer. "We stay alert," Vaughn said. "The deputy and the Millers will help keep watch tonight. I brought supplies and the clothes I promised." He gestured to his saddlebags. "But we might need to move you somewhere safer if Reed and his boys decide to cause more trouble." That evening, after the deputy and the Miller brothers had set up a watch rotation around the property, Tabitha sat with Vaughn on the porch. Lily was asleep inside, and Martha was darning socks by the fire. "I'm sorry for bringing this danger to your door," Tabitha said softly. Vaughn shook his head. "The danger was here before you arrived. Men like Reed have been running Redemption Creek as their personal kingdom for too long. This was bound to come to a head eventually. Still, you could have avoided it by simply not interfering at the auction." Vaughn turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the silver moonlight. "Could you have walked by and done nothing if you saw a child and her mother being sold like cattle?" Tabitha met his gaze. "No, I couldn't have." "Then we understand each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds: crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, the soft nickering of horses in the corral. "Tell me about Boston," Vaughn said eventually. Tabitha sighed. "It's beautiful in some ways, grand buildings, proper society, culture. But it can be suffocating too, especially for a woman alone." "Is that why you married?" "Partly," she admitted. "Thomas was charming when we met, son of my father's business partner, well-educated, handsome. My parents were thrilled with the match." She twisted her hands in her lap. "The drinking started after we were married, then the gambling debts, then the anger." Vaughn's jaw tightened. "Did he hurt Lily too?" "No," Tabitha said quickly. "He never laid a hand on her. That's one mercy, but she saw things no child should see. The night we left, he threatened to sell my mother's jewelry, the only thing I had left of her, when I protested. She touched her cheek unconsciously. Lily saw everything. She helped me pack while he was passed out, 3-year-old, helping her mother escape in the night. Vaughn reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently took her hand. She's brave, like her mother. Tabitha didn't pull away. His calloused hand was warm around hers, strong but gentle. What about you? Where were you before the war? Pennsylvania, he answered. My father was a blacksmith, taught me the trade before I enlisted. After the war, I couldn't go back, too many ghosts. And your sister, the one you mentioned, pain flashed across his features. Elizabeth, she married young to a man who took her west while I was fighting. When I finally tracked them down in Arizona territory, he was dead, killed in a mining accident, and she was trying to make her way back east with my niece Anna. They never made it. Traders took them, sold them to a mining camp. By the time I found them, Elizabeth had died of fever and Anna. He swallowed hard. She was gone too. Tabitha squeezed his hand. I'm so sorry. It was 6 years ago, he said, his voice rough. That's when I decided to wear a badge, thought maybe I could stop it happening to someone else. You did, Tabitha said softly. You stopped it happening to us. Their eyes met in the darkness, and something shifted between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared pain and resilience. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Vaughn was on his feet instantly, hand on his gun. Who's riding? He called to the darkness. It's Jenkins, came the reply. Riders coming from the east, Sheriff. Looks like 6, maybe 7. Vaughn turned to Tabitha. Get inside, wake Martha and stay away from the windows. Heart pounding, Tabitha hurried into the cabin. Martha was already up, shotgun in hand. Trouble. The older woman asked. Riders coming, Tabitha confirmed, moving to check on Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully. Martha nodded grimly. There's a trapdoor under the rug in your room, root cellar below. If shooting starts, you take that child down there and stay put until one of us comes for you. Outside, Vaughn and his men prepared to meet the approaching riders. They positioned themselves strategically around the cabin, using the corral and water trough as cover. The riders slowed as they approached, clearly aware they'd been spotted. That's far enough, Vaughn called out when they were within earshot. State your business, a familiar voice answered. Just came to talk, Sheriff. Seems we have a misunderstanding to clear up. Harlan Reed. The saloon owner from the auction. Nothing to misunderstand, Vaughn replied evenly. The auction was illegal. The woman and her child are free citizens under my protection. Reed laughed, the sound ugly in the night. Protection, is it? Town's talking about what kind of protection you're offering a pretty young widow. Careful, Reed, Vaughn warned, his voice hardening. You're on my property now. Technically, Reed said, the woman is my property. I had the highest bid before you interfered. The auctioneer was ready to close the sale. Human beings aren't property, Vaughn stated firmly. Not in this territory, not anywhere in these United States. Now turn around and head back to town before this gets ugly. Inside the cabin, Tabitha could hear every word. Shame and anger burned within her at being discussed like an object to be possessed. Martha placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. He'll handle it, the older woman whispered. Boy knows what he's doing. Outside, the standoff continued. I'm prepared to be reasonable, Reed called. I'll pay you what you spent, plus a little extra for your trouble. Business transaction, nice and clean. The answer is no, Vaughn said flatly. Now leave. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Reed's voice came again, harder this time. You're making a mistake, Calloway. That badge won't protect you forever. Maybe not, Vaughn agreed, but tonight it's backed by 4 guns against your 7. Those aren't odds I'd bet on. Another silence, longer this time. Finally, the sound of horses moving came through the night. This isn't over, Reed called as they retreated. I know, Vaughn murmured, too quietly for the departing men to hear. He waited until the riders were well away before returning to the cabin. Tabitha and Martha met him at the door. They're gone for now, he reported, but they'll be back. Reed isn't the type to let this go. What do we do? Tabitha asked. Vaughn considered their options. The marshal won't be here for 3 days. We need somewhere safer for you and Lily until then. I know a place, Martha said unexpectedly. My sister's place up in the hills. About 20 miles north. Nobody goes there this time of year. Vaughn nodded slowly. That could work. We'll leave at first light before Reed has a chance to gather more men. That night, Tabitha couldn't sleep. She lay beside Lily, listening to every sound, imagining riders returning in the darkness. Eventually, she rose and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. In the main room, Vaughn sat by the dying fire, rifle across his knees. He looked up as she approached. You should rest, he said softly. Tomorrow will be a long day. I can't sleep, she admitted, settling into the chair opposite him. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men coming back. Vaughn added a small log to the embers. I won't let them take you or Lily, I promise you that. I believe you, Tabitha said, and realized she truly did. In the short time she'd known him, Vaughn Calloway had proven himself more honorable than any man she'd ever met. But I don't want you risking your life for us. Some things are worth the risk. Their eyes met across the flickering light. Tabitha felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. In Boston, she said slowly, I never felt safe. Even before Thomas changed, I always felt like I was playing a part in someone else's story. And now, she considered the question. Now I'm terrified, she admitted with a small laugh. But it's different. I'm afraid for a reason, not just because that's what's expected of me. Vaughn smiled slightly. You're stronger than you know, Tabitha Gray. I'm learning to be, she replied, for Lily's sake, if nothing else. They talked through the night, sharing stories of their lives before this moment. Vaughn told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, about his father's blacksmith shop where he learned to shape metal and recognize true strength. Tabitha shared memories of her mother's garden in Boston, of learning to sew and dream of beautiful things in a world that often felt cold. As dawn approached, a plan was formed. Vaughn and Deputy Jenkins would escort Tabitha, Lily, and Martha to the sisters' cabin in the hills. The Miller brothers would return to town to keep an eye on Reed and his men, reporting any movements. They packed quickly as the sun rose food, clothing, ammunition, and a few precious books that Vaughn insisted Tabitha might enjoy during their stay. Lily was excited about the adventure, too young to understand the danger. The journey north took them through increasingly rugged terrain. They avoided the main trails, instead following game paths and dry creek beds that would be difficult to track. Lily rode with Vaughn, her small hands clutching the saddle horn as she chattered about the birds and animals they spotted. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow valley nestled between two forested ridges. A small cabin sat beside a clear stream, smoke already rising from its chimney. Agnes is expecting us, Martha explained as they approached. I sent the youngest Miller boy ahead at first light. Agnes turned out to be Martha's younger sister by a decade, a spry woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a shotgun of her own. She welcomed them warmly, especially Lily, who she declared was in desperate need of proper feeding. The cabin was smaller than Vaughn's but cozy, with 2 rooms and a loft space above. Agnes had prepared a hearty stew and fresh bread, which they devoured after the long ride. As evening approached, Vaughn prepared to leave. Jenkins and I need to get back. If Reed notices we're all gone, he might figure out what we've done. Tabitha followed him outside as he saddled his horse. How long will we need to stay here? Just until the marshal arrives, Vaughn assured her. 3 days, maybe 4, then we'll sort this out properly, she nodded, fighting the urge to ask him to stay. Be careful, Reed seemed like a man who holds grudges. I've dealt with his kind before. Vaughn tightened the saddle cinch. Besides, I've got something worth coming back for now. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Before Tabitha could respond, Lily came running from the cabin. Are you leaving, Mr. Vaughn? She asked, her small face crestfallen. He knelt down to her level. Just for a few days, little miss. I need to make sure everything's safe before you and your mama come back. Promise you'll come get us, Lily asked seriously. Cross my heart, Vaughn replied, making the gesture. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden horse, clearly hand-carved. I made this for you. To remember me by until I return. Lily took the toy reverently. Thank you, she whispered, then surprised both adults by throwing her arms around Vaughn's neck in a quick hug before running back to show Martha and Agnes her treasure. Vaughn stood, a bemused expression on his face. "She's something special." "Yes, she is," Tabitha agreed softly. "Thank you for being kind to her. Her father never was." "Any man who can't see the blessing in that child isn't worth the name of father," Vaughn said firmly. Impulsively, Tabitha rose on tiptoes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Come back safely." His eyes widened slightly, then softened. "I will," he promised, his voice rough with emotion. As Vaughn and Jenkins rode away, Tabitha watched until they disappeared into the trees. Only then did she allow herself to acknowledge the truth: she was falling for the honorable sheriff who had rescued them. The next 3 days passed slowly at Agnes's cabin. The older women kept Lily entertained with stories and simple crafts, teaching her to make corn husk dolls and identify wildflowers. Tabitha helped with cooking and mending, all the while watching the trail for any sign of Vaughn's return. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Agnes froze while gathering eggs, her head tilted. "Riders coming," she said sharply. "Get inside." Tabitha scooped up Lily from where she'd been playing and hurried into the cabin. Martha and Agnes took up positions at the windows, their shotguns ready. "How many?" Martha asked her sister. "Can't tell yet," Agnes replied. Sound of at least 3 horses, maybe more. Tabitha's heart raced. Could it be Vaughn with the marshal, or had Reed somehow found them? The minutes stretched as they waited, the only sound Lily's confused whimpers and Tabitha's whispered reassurances. Finally, Agnes relaxed slightly. "It's Vaughn," she announced, "and looks like the marshal with him." Relief flooded through Tabitha. She set Lily down and moved to the window. Sure enough, Vaughn was approaching with 2 other men, one wearing a marshal's badge, the other a stranger in a fine suit. Martha opened the door as they dismounted. Vaughn's eyes immediately sought Tabitha's, a smile breaking across his face when he saw her and Lily safe. "Marshal James Turner," he introduced the badge-wearing man, "and this is Mr. Howard Phillips from the Territorial Governor's office." The marshal tipped his hat to the women. "Ladies, I understand we have a situation that needs resolving." Over coffee at Agnes's sturdy table, the situation was explained in full. Tabitha recounted her journey from Boston, the stagecoach attack, and the illegal auction. Mr. Phillips took careful notes. "This is precisely the sort of frontier justice the governor is trying to eliminate," he said gravely. "Human trafficking is explicitly forbidden by territorial law." Marshal Turner nodded in agreement. "We've already arrested the auctioneer. Reed is another matter. He's claiming he was simply participating in a legal sale of indentured servants." "That's absurd," Tabitha protested. "I've never been indentured to anyone." "We know that, madam," the marshal assured her, "but we need proof to make charges stick." "Do you have any papers, anything proving your identity and status?" Tabitha's heart sank. "No, everything was lost in the stagecoach attack." Mr. Phillips leaned forward. "What about in Boston? Is there someone who could vouch for you? Telegraph offices can send messages back east now." Tabitha thought quickly. "My husband's business partner, Mr. Whitcomb, he knew I was leaving with Lily. He helped me plan it, in fact, after seeing what Thomas had done to me." "Good," the marshal said. "We'll send a telegram immediately." "If this Mr. Whitcomb confirms your story, Reed won't have a legal leg to stand on." Vaughn, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. "What about in the meantime? It's not safe for them to return to town yet." "I agree," the marshal said. "Mrs. Gray and her daughter should remain here until we receive confirmation from Boston." He looked at Tabitha apologetically. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, madam, but it's for your own protection." "I understand," Tabitha said, "and I appreciate everything you're doing." As the afternoon wore on, the marshal and Mr. Phillips prepared to return to town. Vaughn approached Tabitha where she stood by the stream, watching Lily play with her wooden horse. "I'll be staying here tonight," he told her. "Just as a precaution." Tabitha nodded, relief washing through her. "Thank you, Lily will be pleased. She's missed you." "Just Lily?" Vaughn asked softly. Tabitha felt her cheeks warm. "No, not just Lily." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. I thought about you both every minute I was gone, Vaughn, Tabitha began, then hesitated. When this is all over, what happens then? What do you want to happen? The directness of the question caught her off guard. In Boston, women were taught to be circumspect, to hint and suggest rather than speak plainly of their desires. But this wasn't Boston, and Vaughn Calloway wasn't a man for games. I want Lily to be safe, she said first, the need to protect her daughter always foremost. Beyond that, I'm not sure. San Francisco seems very far away now. It is far, Vaughn agreed, nearly 1,000 miles. Long journey for a mother and child alone. Are you suggesting we stay in Redemption Creek? Tabitha asked, surprised. Not necessarily in town, Vaughn clarified, but perhaps nearby. My homestead has plenty of room. Martha's been saying for months she needs help with the household. Tabitha studied his face, trying to understand what he was offering. As your housekeeper, a flash of frustration crossed his features. No, Tabitha, not as my housekeeper. Then as what? Vaughn took a deep breath. I know it's too soon, we've known each other less than a week. But in that time, I've come to care for you and Lily more than I thought possible. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not asking for promises, just asking you to consider staying, to see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you're feeling too, might grow into something lasting. Tabitha's heart raced. After Thomas, she'd sworn never to trust a man again, never to put herself or Lily at risk. Yet here was this honorable, gentle man offering not demands but possibilities. I'm afraid, she admitted, my judgment with men hasn't been the best. Understandable, Vaughn said, his voice kind. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. Before she could respond, Lily came running up, clutching wildflowers. Look what I found, Mama. Miss Agnes says they're called bluebonnets. Vaughn crouched down to admire the flowers. Those are special, little miss. They say if you make a wish on a bluebonnet, it might come true. Lily's eyes widened. Really? She clutched the flowers tighter, closed her eyes tightly, and whispered something. What did you wish for? Tabitha asked, smiling at her daughter's seriousness. Lily shook her head. Can't tell or it won't come true. But she glanced between her mother and Vaughn with a knowing look beyond her years. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Tabitha was helping Agnes with breakfast when Martha called from outside. Riders coming, looks like Reed and his men. Vaughn was instantly alert, buckling on his gun belt. Stay inside, he ordered Tabitha. Keep Lily away from the windows. He strode outside to join Martha, who had her shotgun ready. Agnes pressed a rifle into Tabitha's hands. Just in case, the older woman said grimly. Through the window, Tabitha could see Harlan Reed approaching with 4 armed men. Vaughn stood his ground on the porch, hand resting casually near his holster. That's far enough, Reed, he called when the riders were about 30 yards away. Reed reined in his horse, smirking. Sheriff. Fancy meeting you here, almost like you're hiding something or someone. I'm on official business with Marshal Turner, Vaughn replied evenly. Whatever grievance you think you have needs to go through proper legal channels, Reed laughed. Legal channels. That's rich, coming from the man who interfered with a legitimate auction. There was nothing legitimate about it, Vaughn countered. Selling free citizens is illegal in this territory. She hasn't proven she's free, Reed argued. For all we know, she's a runaway. And I paid good money for her and the brat. Inside, Tabitha felt rage burn through her at Reed's words. Lily clung to her skirts, sensing the tension. The marshal is investigating, Vaughn said firmly. Until he makes his determination, Mrs. Gray and her daughter remain under my protection. Reed's smirk vanished, replaced by cold anger. You're overstepping, Calloway. The town council's already asking questions about your conduct. Sheriff taking a pretty young woman to his homestead, mighty suspicious. Careful, Reed, Vaughn warned, his voice hardening. That's slander you're speaking. Truth hurts, doesn't it? Reed taunted. Everyone knows you bought yourself a woman, only difference is you're pretending it was heroic. Vaughn's hand moved closer to his gun. Last warning. Leave now or I'll arrest you for harassment and threatening an officer of the law. For a tense moment, it seemed Reed might draw. His men shifted nervously, hands hovering near their weapons. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. No need for that, Sheriff. We're leaving. He turned his horse. But this isn't over, not by a long shot. As Reed and his men rode away, Vaughn remained watchful until they disappeared from sight. Only then did he return inside, his expression grim. "They'll be back," he said flatly, "and with more men next time. What do we do?" Tabitha asked, still holding the rifle Agnes had given her. Vaughn considered their options. "We need to move you again, somewhere Reed won't think to look." "The old mining cabin," Agnes suggested. "Up in the high country, nobody's used it for years." Vaughn nodded slowly. "That could work." "It's remote, defensible." He looked at Tabitha. "But it would be rough living for you and Lily." "We'll manage," Tabitha said firmly. "We've endured worse." They prepared to leave immediately, packing only essentials. The mining cabin was a half-day's ride deeper into the mountains, accessible only by a narrow trail that would be difficult to follow. As they rode, Lily sitting securely in front of Vaughn on his horse, Tabitha found herself studying the rugged landscape with new eyes. A week ago, such wilderness would have terrified her. Now she saw the beauty in its harsh lines, the soaring pines, the dramatic rock formations, the unexpected wildflowers clinging to seemingly barren soil. "It's beautiful up here," she commented to Martha, who rode beside her. The older woman nodded. "It grows on you. First time I came west, I cried for a month straight, missed trees and proper houses. Now can't imagine living anywhere else." "I'm starting to understand that feeling," Tabitha admitted. By late afternoon, they reached the mining cabin. It was smaller than Agnes's place, little more than a single room with a stone fireplace and a loft space above. But it was solid, with thick walls and a good view of the approaching trail. "It's not much," Vaughn apologized as he helped Tabitha down from her horse. "It's perfect," she assured him. "No one will find us here." Agnes had opted to return to her own cabin, believing that Reed wouldn't bother an old woman living alone. Martha, however, insisted on staying with Tabitha and Lily. "Someone's got to teach this girl proper cooking," she declared, already setting about building a fire in the long, cold hearth. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep in the loft, Tabitha joined Vaughn outside where he sat keeping watch beneath a sky blazing with stars. "I've never seen so many," she marveled, gazing upward. "One of the benefits of being far from city lights," Vaughn replied, making room for her on the rough-hewn bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night sounds of the wilderness surrounding them. "I've been thinking about what you said," Tabitha finally ventured. "About staying," Vaughn turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. "And I think I'd like to try," she said softly. "Not making promises I'm not ready to keep, but not running away either." She met his gaze steadily. "Lily needs stability. She needs to know what it's like to have a man in her life who's kind and honorable." "And what do you need, Tabitha?" Vaughn asked, his voice gentle. The question caught her off guard. For so long she'd thought only of Lily's needs, setting aside her own. "I need to feel safe," she admitted. "Not just physically safe, but safe to be myself, safe to want things, safe to dream again." Vaughn's hand found hers in the darkness. "I can offer that safety if you'll let me," she smiled, squeezing his fingers. "I believe you can." They stayed that way for a long time, hands joined beneath the vast canopy of stars, each lost in thoughts of possibilities. The next morning brought a surprise. Tabitha was helping Martha prepare breakfast when Vaughn, who'd been scouting the trail, returned in haste. "Rider's coming," he announced. "But it's not Reed, it's the marshal, and he's got company." They hurried outside to see Marshal Turner approaching with another man Tabitha didn't recognize. As they drew closer, she gasped in shock. "Mr. Whitcomb." The distinguished gentleman dismounting beside the marshal smiled warmly. "Mrs. Gray, thank heavens you're safe." Edward Whitcomb had been her husband's business partner for years, and one of the few people in Boston who had shown Tabitha genuine kindness. After Thomas had beaten her that final time, it was Whitcomb who had helped her plan her escape, providing money and information about the journey west. "What are you doing here?" Tabitha asked, still stunned by his unexpected appearance. "When the marshal's telegram arrived, I knew a simple reply wouldn't be sufficient," Whitcomb explained. "I was already planning to travel to San Francisco on business. It was a small detour to come verify your identity in person." Marshal Turner nodded. Mr. Whitcomb has provided sworn testimony that you are indeed Tabitha Gray, a free woman of good standing from Boston, traveling west with your daughter by choice. And there's more, Whitcomb added. Your husband Thomas has been arrested for embezzlement from our company. He won't be troubling you again for many years, if ever. The news washed over Tabitha like a cleansing rain. Free, truly free, not just from the immediate threat of Reed, but from the shadow of Thomas that had followed her west. Thank you, she whispered, unexpected tears filling her eyes. Whitcomb patted her hand. It was the least I could do. Now the marshal tells me there's been some trouble here, over coffee inside the cabin. Marshal Turner explained the latest developments. With Mr. Whitcomb's testimony, Reed has no legal claim whatsoever. I've already issued warrants for his arrest and those who participated in the illegal auction. What about the town council? Vaughn asked. Reed said they were questioning my conduct. The marshal smiled slightly. The council has more immediate concerns. Seems Reed's been skimming from tax collections for years. Mr. Phillips uncovered it while investigating the auction records. So it's over? Tabitha asked cautiously. We're safe. Reed's a wanted man now, the marshal confirmed. He won't risk showing his face in Redemption Creek again. Relief flooded through her. For the first time since fleeing Boston, the constant weight of fear lifted from her shoulders. What will you do now, Mrs. Gray? Whitcomb asked. Your cousin in San Francisco is still expecting you. Tabitha glanced at Vaughn, whose expression remained carefully neutral despite the tension in his shoulders. I think, she said slowly, that Lily and I have had enough traveling for now. We've found a place here that feels right. Whitcomb's keen eyes moved between Tabitha and Vaughn, understanding dawning. I see. Well, your cousin will be disappointed, but I'm sure she'll understand when I explain the circumstances. That afternoon, as Whitcomb prepared to continue his journey to San Francisco, he took Tabitha aside. Are you certain about this decision? He asked gently. It's a hard life out here for a woman alone, Tabitha smiled. I won't be alone, and yes, I'm certain. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Whitcomb nodded, satisfied. Then I wish you happiness, my dear. You deserve it after everything you've endured. He pressed an envelope into her hands, a small gift to help you start your new life. Inside was a bank draft for a considerable sum of money from her share of the business that Thomas had tried to keep from her. As Whitcomb and the marshal departed, promising to send word once Reed was captured, Tabitha felt a profound sense of closure. One chapter of her life was ending, but another one filled with promise was just beginning. The journey back to Vaughn's homestead was joyful rather than fearful. Lily chattered excitedly about returning to the chickens and the vegetable garden, while Martha grumbled good-naturedly about all the cleaning that would need doing after their absence. When the familiar cabin came into view, Tabitha felt an unexpected emotion. She felt like she was coming home. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. With Reed and his men on the run, life in Redemption Creek began to change. Townspeople who had been intimidated into silence came forward with stories of corruption and threats. The territorial governor sent additional lawmen to help restore order. Vaughn remained busy with his duties as sheriff, but every evening he returned to the homestead where Tabitha and Lily waited. Their relationship grew naturally, without pressure or expectations. Tabitha began helping with the garden, expanding it with seeds she ordered from a catalog. Lily thrived in the open spaces, her nightmares about Boston fading as she embraced her new life. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Vaughn turned to Tabitha with uncharacteristic nervousness. I've been meaning to ask you something, he began, fidgeting with his hat. Tabitha smiled encouragingly. What is it? The town council met yesterday. They've asked me to continue as sheriff with a proper salary this time. He cleared his throat. But I told them I needed to discuss it with you first. With me? Tabitha asked, surprised. Why would my opinion matter to the town council? Vaughn set his hat aside and took her hands in his. Because I'm hoping by then you'll be my wife. The simple, heartfelt proposal took her breath away. Vaughn, I know it hasn't been long, he hurried on, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Tabitha. I love Lily as if she were my own. I want us to be a family officially. Tears of joy filled Tabitha's eyes. Are you sure? Taking on a ready-made family isn't easy. Easy has never been my way, Vaughn said with a smile, but right, this feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Tabitha leaned forward and kissed him gently. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. From the doorway came a small squeal of delight. They turned to find Lily watching them, her wooden horse clutched in one hand. Does this mean Mr. Vaughn will be my papa now? She asked hopefully. Vaughn opened his arms and Lily ran to him, climbing onto his lap. If that's what you'd like, little miss, he said softly. Lily nodded solemnly. I wished for it on the bluebonnets. Miss Agnes said it would come true if I believed hard enough. Tabitha laughed through her tears. Well, it seems your wish came true. 2 weeks later, on a perfect autumn day, Tabitha Gray became Tabitha Calloway in a simple ceremony in the town church. The same townspeople who had stood silently at the auction now celebrated their sheriff's marriage to the woman he had saved. Martha, resplendent in her best dress, gave the bride away. Lily served as flower girl, scattering wildflower petals with solemn dedication. Even Agnes made the journey from her cabin, declaring she wouldn't miss seeing Vaughn finally settling down for all the gold in California. As they exchanged vows, Tabitha marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The fear and pain of her past seemed distant now, overwhelmed by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. That evening, after the celebrations had ended and Lily was asleep in her new bedroom, a space Vaughn had added to the cabin in preparation for their marriage, the newlyweds stood together on the porch, looking out at the land that was now truly their home. Happy. Vaughn asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. Tabitha leaned back against his chest, savoring his warmth and strength. More than I ever thought possible. You know, he said thoughtfully, when I saw you on that auction block, something inside me just knew. They tried to sell a mother with her child, but all I could think was they belong with me. It wasn't rational. It wasn't planned. It just was. Tabitha turned in his arms to face him. Sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the mind catches up. My heart wants you, Vaughn said simply. You and Lily. Forever, you have us, Tabitha promised, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Forever. As the stars emerged above their home, Tabitha reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her west. What had begun as a desperate flight from danger had become a journey to love and belonging. In this man's arms, in this wild, beautiful land, she had found not just safety, but joy, a joy she intended to nurture and cherish for all the days to come. 5 years later, the Calloway homestead had flourished into one of the most prosperous in the region. The original cabin had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. Lily, now 8, had been joined by 3-year-old twins James and Elizabeth, named for Vaughn's father and sister. Vaughn had eventually hung up his sheriff's badge to focus on ranching, though he still served as a deputy when needed. Tabitha had opened a small dressmaking shop in town, putting her Boston skills to use creating practical but beautiful clothing for frontier women. On warm summer evenings, they still sat together on the porch, watching their children play in the yard that Tabitha had transformed with flowers and fruit trees. Sometimes Martha would join them, though she complained that the twins ran her ragged with their endless energy. Any regrets? Vaughn asked one such evening, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Tabitha looked at their home, their land, their children, at the life they had built together from what had started as the darkest moment of her life. Not a single one, she answered truthfully. Everything that happened led me here to you. How could I regret that? In the distance, Lily was teaching the twins to make daisy chains, her patient instruction reminding Tabitha so much of Vaughn that it made her heart swell with love and pride. She's so much like you, she commented. Vaughn smiled, watching the girl who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. She's got your spirit, though, brave and determined. Do you ever think about Reed? Tabitha asked suddenly. The man who had tried to buy them had eventually been captured and imprisoned for his crimes, but sometimes the memory of that day on the auction block still haunted her dreams. Sometimes, Vaughn admitted. Not because I fear him, but because in a strange way I'm grateful. Grateful. He nodded, tightening his arm around her. If he hadn't tried to buy you that day, I might never have found the courage to step forward, might have just watched and regretted like I'd done too many times before. Tabitha leaned into his embrace. Then I'm grateful too, even for the hard parts. As twilight deepened into night, Lily herded her younger siblings toward the house, her sense of responsibility already well developed. Vaughn rose to help, scooping up the sleepy twins with practiced ease. Tabitha watched her family, the family that had been forged in crisis, but strengthened by love, and said a silent prayer of thanks. The road had been long and often difficult, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be. In the heart of the Wild West, she had found not just safety but purpose, not just shelter but home, not just a protector but a partner. And in that moment, as she rose to join her husband and children, Tabitha knew with absolute certainty that some things truly were meant to be. They belonged together, they always had,